At an upscale restaurant, an unremarkable-looking man walked in, instantly becoming the target of scrutinizing glances and whispered remarks. No one realized that behind this modest exterior lay one of the most powerful men in the world. But the surprise of the story isn't about his true identity. It's about how people treated him during an unprecedented social experiment. Can kindness thrive in a world riddled with prejudice and judgment? Prepare yourself, because the ending of this story may prompt you to reflect on your own actions. If you enjoy heartwarming, inspirational tales, don't miss what comes next. Elon Musk sat quietly in his office, savoring a rare moment of calm amidst the whirlwind of creativity and ambition that had shaped his life. The idea came to him during a casual conversation with a colleague about human behavior. What would happen if people didn't recognize him? How would they treat someone who appeared to have nothing? The thought lingered, eventually morphing into an irresistible challenge. A few weeks later, on a gloomy Thursday afternoon, Elon finalized the details. The disguise was simple yet effective. Worn-out clothes from a thrift shop, a pair of scuffed sneakers, and a disheveled wig. A makeup team altered his face, adding subtle touches to erase the features familiar from magazine covers and news broadcasts. When he looked into the mirror, the reflection staring back was not Elon Musk, the billionaire, the innovator. It was a man who looked like he had endured life's hardships. He carefully chose his destination, Maple Grove, a high-end restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, renowned for its exclusivity and elite clientele. It was the perfect stage for his experiment. This wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about uncovering the truth of human nature. Would people look beyond appearances, or would they let surface judgments dictate their behavior? Before leaving, Elon took one last look at himself in the mirror. The unfamiliar reflection was haunting. For the first time in years, he felt invisible, detached from the identity that had defined his existence. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out the door, his heart pounding harder than he had expected. The drive to the restaurant was uneventful. The city bustled with its usual rhythm. But for Elon, every moment felt charged with anticipation. As he approached the double doors of Maple Grove, he paused briefly, then pushed them open, beginning his experiment. Inside, the atmosphere radiated sophistication. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over meticulously arranged tables, and the soft hum of conversation mingled with the gentle clinking of glassware. Elon's entrance sent a faint ripple through the room. Diners glanced up briefly, then resumed their meals. But the staff reacted differently. Their hesitant gazes darted toward him, tinged with curiosity and unease. He walked slowly across the polished wooden floor, acutely aware of the sound his worn sneakers made with each step. A hostess in a crisp black uniform approached him with a professional smile, though her expression faltered slightly as she took in his appearance. "How can I assist you?" she asked, her tone polite but tinged with tension. "I'd like a table for one," Elon replied, his voice calm yet soft. The hostess's smile flickered as she glanced toward the bar, where the manager, Richard Blake, stood watching. "We're fully booked tonight," she said quickly, her eyes briefly scanning the row of empty tables. Elon caught the look but said nothing. He waited, letting the silence stretch, amplifying the discomfort in the air. From across the room, a young waitress named Emily noticed the interaction. She had only been working at Maple Grove for a few months, saving up for culinary school. Something about the man's demeanor caught her attention. It wasn't pity, it was curiosity. He didn't seem like someone merely seeking refuge. "I'll seat him," Emily said, stepping forward before the hostess could brush the guest aside. The room fell momentarily still. All eyes turned to Emily, including the managers, who frowned but didn't intervene. Elon gave Emily a faint smile as she led him to a small table near the kitchen. It wasn't the most desirable spot, but it was a seat, and he was grateful. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Take your time with the menu," Emily replied, placing it in front of him with a warm smile, ignoring the murmurs around her. As Elon flipped through the menu, he surveyed the room. The gazes of other diners oscillated between curiosity and disdain. He overheard snippets of their hushed conversations. Who is he? Why would they let someone like that in here? The staff seemed equally unsettled. A waiter murmured to a colleague, What's he doing here? Another added, This is going to drive away our regulars. Elon remained silent, absorbing every reaction. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, painting a vivid picture of how appearances shape judgment. Emily returned to take his order. Just soup and bread? She asked, her voice gentle, but unable to mask her surprise. That's all, Elon replied. She didn't press further, quietly heading back to the kitchen, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the weight of the stairs around him. The murmurs grew louder, becoming more distinct. A man sitting nearby leaned over to his companion and whispered, What was the manager thinking, letting him in here? Elon didn't react, his focus unwavering as he observed everything. Every detail stood out. The hostess's averted gaze, the bartender's subtle chuckle shared with a colleague, and the barely concealed disdain in the manager's glances. When Emily returned with the tray, she placed a steaming bowl of tomato soup and a small basket of bread before him with the same care she would offer any other guest. Enjoy your meal, she said, her smile genuine. Thank you, Elon responded, meeting her eyes. He could sense it. Emily's actions weren't just about doing her job. They came from a place of sincerity and kindness. As he ate, he quietly observed Emily moving between tables. She moved briskly, yet with an air of calm. Even when faced with the most demanding customers, she maintained her patience and professionalism. In another corner, an older woman waved Emily over, her expression distinctly displeased. Why are you wasting your time on him? The woman asked, her eyes flicking disdainfully toward Elon. She tilted her head slightly, gesturing meaningfully. People like that shouldn't be allowed in here. Emily's cheeks flushed, her hands tightening slightly on her tray, but her voice remained steady. I believe everyone deserves respect, ma'am, she replied firmly. The woman scoffed, turning back to her meal without another word. Elon sat silently, observing the exchange. He couldn't help but admire Emily's courage. In a place like this, standing up for someone society looked down upon was no easy feat. As Elon finished his soup, another waiter approached. The young man, likely in his 20s, carried himself with a stiff demeanor and heavy steps. Are you planning to order anything else? His tone was cold, bordering on rude. No, thank you, Elon replied calmly. The waiter forced a tight-lipped smile before turning on his heel, muttering under his breath. Elon caught the words waste of space, but chose not to react. And in a different corner, a young couple whispered to each other. The girl glanced nervously in Elon's direction, her face anxious. What if he asks us for money? She murmured. The boy shrugged, though his wary expression betrayed his unease. Despite the sea of stares fixed on him, Elon remained composed. Inside, his thoughts churned. This experiment wasn't just about how people treated him. It was a reflection of how quick they were to judge someone they knew nothing about. When Emily returned to clear the table, she paused briefly, looking at him and asking softly, Was everything all right, sir? Elon looked up, momentarily surprised. Yes, thank you for your kindness. Her eyes softened, and she gave a slight nod before continuing her work. In that brief moment, Elon caught a glimpse of the humanity he had hoped to find, a flicker of compassion amidst a sea of judgment. The restaurant's atmosphere remained tense, yet Elon felt a sense of clarity. This experiment was revealing far more than he had anticipated, and the next phase promised to be even more enlightening. The room seemed to collectively hold its breath as Elon stood up. The meal was over, but his challenge had just begun. He walked slowly toward the center of the room, each step drawing the attention of every pair of eyes. Emily, carrying a tray of empty glasses, stopped in her tracks, her curious gaze following him. The manager, who had been silently observing from the start, swiftly approached. His face betrayed his irritation, ready to escort this unusual guest out of the restaurant. Sir, if you've finished your meal, I must ask you to leave, the manager said coldly, his words cutting like a knife. Elon raised a hand to stop him, his voice calm yet commanding. I will leave shortly, but before I do, I need to say something. The room fell silent. The diners who had been whispering and mocking now looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Slowly, Elon raised his hand and removed the wig that had concealed his identity. Audible gasps filled the air as his familiar face came into view, clearer than ever. "Elon Musk," someone muttered, incredulous. Elon gave them a moment to process the revelation before speaking. "Yes, it's me," he began, scanning the room with a steady gaze. "Tonight I didn't come here as the man you all know, but as someone you wouldn't spare a second glance. I wanted to see how people treat one another when appearances are stripped away." The room remained frozen, everyone listening intently in silence. I saw disdain. I heard whispers. And I felt the weight of judgment, all because of how I appeared, he continued, his voice steady yet tinged with disappointment. But there was one person, just one, who treated me with kindness and respect. His eyes landed on Emily, who stood frozen, the tray in her hands forgotten. "Emily," he called, motioning for her to come forward. "You didn't know who I was, but you chose to treat me like a human being. That is what truly matters." Emily's face flushed red as she set down the tray and hesitantly stepped forward. "I was just doing my job," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Elon shook his head, his expression sincere. "No, you did more than that. You showed compassion, even when it would have been easier to turn away." All eyes in the room were now on Emily. Some gazes reflected guilt, others admiration. Turning back to the rest of the room, Elon addressed them. "To those of you who judged me tonight, consider this a lesson. Appearances can deceive, but how you treat others reveals who you truly are." Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a small envelope and handed it to Emily. "This is for you." Her hands trembled as she took it and opened it. Inside was a check and a handwritten note. She read the words aloud, her voice breaking. "Emily, thank you for your kindness. Use this money to chase your dreams, go to culinary school, open your own restaurant, or whatever you choose. The world needs more people like you." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she finished reading. The $50,000 check slipped from her fingers and the room erupted in a wave of hushed astonishment. Elon turned to the manager, who stood awkwardly nearby. "As for this restaurant, let this serve as a reminder to build a culture of respect for anyone who walks through your doors." The manager, Richard Blake, nodded stiffly, too flustered to respond. The atmosphere in the restaurant was heavy with meaning. As Elon walked toward the exit, he paused briefly and looked back at Emily. "Never lose that light of kindness. It's rare and it's powerful." The doors closed behind him, leaving the room filled with people deep in thought. The diners who had once mocked him now avoided each other's eyes, awkwardly fidgeting with their silverware. Emily stood motionless, the note in her hand, her heart swelling with emotion and pride. The manager, Richard Blake, slowly approached her, breaking the tense silence. "You handled yourself very well tonight," he said softly, his usual arrogance noticeably absent. Emily looked up, her eyes glistening, but her expression composed. "Thank you," she replied politely, her tone distant. She knew that Richard Blake had been among the first to doubt Elon's presence. His change in demeanor now felt hollow and overdue. At a nearby table, a family who had blatantly stared at Elon earlier now whispered among themselves. The father sighed, his face a mix of guilt and regret. "We shouldn't have judged him like that," he admitted to his teenage son, who nodded silently. At another table, a woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, her voice choked as she turned to her companion. "And how many others have we treated like that without even realizing it?" Emily quietly returned to her work, clearing plates and resetting tables, but the weight of the evening lingered in the air. Every interaction she had with customers carried an unspoken apology, a shared understanding that they had all learned an unexpected lesson. As the evening wound down, Emily slipped into the kitchen to catch her breath. She unfolded Elon's note and read it again, slowly, taking in each word. Beneath the message of thanks, he had written one final line. "Kindness is a currency that never loses its value. Keep giving it away." Emily's heart felt full as she carefully folded the note and tucked it into her apron pocket. to her, those words were a reminder of what truly mattered. As the last table was cleared and the staff prepared to end their shift, the atmosphere in the restaurant felt different. It was quieter, more reflective. The usual lively chatter and laughter had been replaced by an unusual stillness. As was customary, the team gathered briefly before leaving for the night. The manager, noticeably more subdued than his usual confident self, chose his words carefully as he addressed the group. "Tonight was unique," he began, his tone hesitant. "I think we all have something to reflect on after what happened. Let's ensure this place truly represents the values we claim to uphold." Emily caught the glances of a few colleagues. Some gave her small, acknowledging smiles, a silent recognition of her actions. She didn't need their praise, but the quiet acknowledgement still lightened her heart. As she left the restaurant that night, Emily carefully tucked the envelope into her bag. The money inside would undoubtedly change her life, but the lesson she had witnessed would forever change how she viewed the world. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual energy, but for Emily, everything felt sharper, more vivid. Elon Musk's experiment hadn't just left an imprint on her heart. It had left its mark on the restaurant and everyone who had been there to witness it. A few days later, the story of Elon Musk's secret experiment spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with discussions, and the tale quickly reached millions worldwide. Headlines like, "Elon Musk tests compassion at an exclusive restaurant," "Billionaire rewards kindness in an unforgettable social experiment." Maple Grove became the center of attention, though not all the publicity was positive. The initial reactions from the staff and diners drew heavy criticism, sparking widespread conversations about compassion, societal judgment, and the influence of appearances on human behavior. Emily's life, meanwhile, changed overnight. Reporters sought her out, eager to hear her perspective. At first, she felt overwhelmed by the sudden spotlight, but when she finally spoke, her words were simple yet powerful. "It wasn't about knowing who he was," she told a journalist. "It was about how I chose to treat another human being, with respect, regardless of the circumstances. That's what we all should do, not just for a billionaire in disguise, but for everyone." The $50,000 check allowed Emily to enroll in culinary school, a dream she had once thought unreachable. But more importantly, the experience gave her a platform to advocate for kindness and empathy, not just in the service industry, but in life as a whole. As for Elon, he reflected quietly on the outcome of his experiment. In an interview a few months later, he shared his thoughts succinctly. "It reminded me that the smallest actions can reveal the greatest truths," he said. "Kindness isn't about grand gestures. It's about the daily choices we make." Maple Grove changed, too. The management implemented new training programs emphasizing empathy and respect for every customer, regardless of appearance. Staff members who had been dismissive that night re-examined their own biases and behaviors. For those who had been present that evening, the lesson lingered. Many returned to their daily lives with a renewed perspective, carrying the memory of that night as a reminder of the enduring importance of kindness. Elon Musk's experiment was not merely the story of a billionaire in disguise. It became a powerful message about the value of humanity, something far greater than wealth, status, or appearances. And though the world continued its relentless pace, Emily and those who had witnessed that night would never forget the profound ripple effect of one small act of kindness. It proved that, in a society often obsessed with outward success, the true measure of a person shines brightest when no one is watching. What do you think of Elon Musk's bold experiment? How would you have acted in Emily's position or in the shoes of the other diners? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire others to reflect and make a positive change. If you found this story meaningful, share it with your friends and loved ones to help create a world filled with more kindness and respect. Thank you for reading and supporting our content. Don't forget to like and follow us for more inspiring and thought-provoking stories. Let's turn small acts of kindness into big changes for our community. wishing you happiness and joy.